A lot of big companies have touted OKRs as the reason why they've been able to grow and achieve some of their bigger visions. So think about the likes of Google have utilized it, Microsoft has used it before, Airbnb. It helps you to keep your eyes on the bigger vision of why we exist and the purpose and what we are trying to drive.
Hello everyone and welcome to HR Hot Topics. In this episode we're going to talk about objectives and key results, also known as OKRs. Before we kick it off, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Dieter, my first question to you. Why is there so much hype around OKRs?
I think there's a couple of reasons, Eric. And the first one is a lot of big companies have touted OKRs as the reason why they've been able to grow and achieve some of their bigger visions. So think about the likes of Google have utilized it, Microsoft has used it before, Airbnb. I think on the other side as well, a lot of people are asking the question to say, but is there no other way than traditional performance management to get towards goal setting? So I think it's a little bit of both those reasons why OKRs has become a hot topic for the moment in terms of whether it will work for the organization or not. Eric, what is OKRs? Because I think there's a lot of hype and we need to unpack it a little bit more in terms of what does it do practically in the organization.
So OKRs is short for objectives and key results. So you start with a couple of objectives. Oftentimes these are company objectives and you have 3 or 4 objectives, like we want to delight our customers. Now these objectives are broken down into key results. Key results are KPIs or key performance indicator. KPI example of delighting our customers could be we want to have a net promoter score that is greater than 30. For example, these KRs can then be broken down into different initiatives where individuals or smaller teams can then work on. And this works in organizations. This also works for a department. So your HR department could also have its own objectives, not too many, 3 or 4, and then break it down into different KPIs. And that really helps us align what we do in HR with the broader organization. So what are these benefits of OKRs, Dieter?
For me, Eric, the first one is that it helps you to keep your eyes on the bigger vision of why we exist and the purpose and what we are trying to drive. And I think what it also does, and traditional performance management tries to do it as well through the cascading process, but OKRs are a little bit more agile and flexible around making sure that people align and what is that end result that we want to get to? What is the impact? Because I think it really is a measure of what the impact is in the organization. The method of OKRs also enhances a lot of open communication. It's a much more of a dialogue type of approach for people to get together and say, if that team does this, if we contribute that, will we get towards that eventual result that we are trying to aim to get to? So I think it's a lot more open, a lot more transparency for me in that regard as well. The last thing, Eric, really is the adaptability. I think traditional performance management gets a lot of criticism around the fact that it's too static and the world around us changes very, very quickly. OKRs are designed in a way that you can have on a more frequent cadence adjust goals and directions while still keeping the bigger vision in mind. And I think that's really, a good opportunity and a good way to think about it as HR, as an alternative and a newer way to explore making sure that goals are achieved. Eric, we've spoken about OKRs, why they work, what the advantages are, especially when you're in HR. What are some of the key things? Can you give us a good practical example of an OKR? Because that's where a lot of people get stuck. What does this actually look like in practice?
I'll give an example of an objective that is specific to HR. And that objective is we want to become an irresistible employer. If you want to become an irresistible employer, that is your objective, how do you break that down into different key results, into KPIs? One KPI could be that you want to align your worker compensation across the board at 70% of the industry benchmark. So you make sure that everyone is compensated, just above the industry average, because that will help you become that irresistible employer. Might also mean that you want to increase your employer brand, for example, that you say, hey, I want to increase my brand recognition from, 40 by 10 points to 50 on a scale of 100, depending on how you measure it. And another key result could be we want to increase our offer acceptance ratio. That's now at 80%. We want to increase it by the end of the year to 85%. Those are 3 KPIs that roll up to that objective of becoming a more irresistible employer. And then, as I said, you can have different initiatives beyond that, where you say, we want to create a new offer template that is more attractive and that will help us get towards that higher offer acceptance ratio. That is, I think, one good example of OKRs, but I bet you also have an example.
A good one I've heard was around making sure that we are a a destination for top talent and really as an overall objective that the organization wanted to achieve, that then gets broken down into things like achieve a top 50 industry ranking in Great Place to Work. Make sure that our employee value proposition competes with others in a similar industry. And that's then broken down really, and collectively all these different areas then rolls up to say, but we want to be that top talent destination, and that's how we're going to get there. Erik, let's expand a bit also on the dark side of OKRs, because it's not all great. There is also some limitations of this approach that we need to be aware of.
I think there's two dark sides to OKR. First of all, OKRs is not a solution. It's a process. It's a goal-setting process. So it takes a long time to get that process up and running, get the senior leadership team aligned on the objectives, and then cascade it down into the teams for the key results, and then cascade it down again to define the initiatives. So getting it up to speed can take a long time. On the other hand, it's also a complex process. So it could be that as these goals are broken down, that different departments may come up with different or conflicting key results. And I think that is a real danger. And the other danger is that there's an overemphasis of quantitative measures, because these KRs should be KPIs, should be quantitative and specific. Sometimes a qualitative goal can also add a lot of value to your organizational strategy.
I love that last point, Erik, around also not ignoring qualitative metrics and qualitative feedback. I do think we fall into the trap, especially regardless of which method we utilize, is that we want to quantify what output looks like. And I think there is broader opportunities to also look at some of the depth, some of the sentiment that we find with regards to that. So I definitely agree with you. I think the first time you run it, you have to be prepared that there is some education that needs to happen within the organization. It's not going to work immediately. A mistake a lot of organizations make that I've seen before is they try it out, and then after a couple of weeks they give up, and then they say, oh, the idea was great, but in practice it didn't work. You have to see it through to make sure that you kind of tighten it over time so that it becomes part of the way that you just think about delivery and execution.
Yeah. And beyond tightening, what are some best practices that HR can put in place to make OKRs work, Dieter?
I think the first one, Erik, is you have to be absolutely clear on your strategy and your purpose as an organization. I've seen OKR sessions where nobody actually knows where the organization is going. So it's this guessing game of what are some of the things that we need to do. So be crystal clear on that. The second one is keep it simple. A lot of people fall into the trap that they go into so much detail during this process that eventually it becomes unmanageable. It's more important to get people aligned towards a common goal and knowing what they need to go and do, as opposed to unpacking it into the nth degree of detail. So try to keep it as simple as possible. It is a process around collaboration and communication. So get the right people around the table, make sure that everybody's voice is heard and contributes whilst still steering it within the right direction. And really the last one there is, we've already spoken about that, but that is focus on the balance between quantitative and qualitative metrics. Don't have a bias towards one of the two. Make sure that we are actually looking at the things that is going to move the business forward. I think something just to consider as a best practice, make sure, and you mentioned it earlier, that everybody is aligned. And once we've set these things, that they all make sense in terms of what the bigger narrative and picture of the organization needs to be.
And I think that is also a big part of the value of OKRs. It is a process of setting goals. So it's, following that OKR process will help you align. I think from my side, maybe a final best practice, don't use more than 3 or 4 objectives with maybe 3 key results below them and maybe a couple of initiatives, but don't make it too large. Don't put everything you do in your essentially strategic focus, because it is a focus. So it should be specific and it should have a certain narrowness to it. Otherwise, it's not a focus anymore. So in this episode of HR Hot Topics, you've learned about HR OKRs, about what they are, why they are so popular, how we can implement them in HR, and what the dark side of OKRs is as well. So before we wrap up, let me leave you with a question, because I would love to read your input in the comments. My question is, have you tried to work with OKRs and what was your experience? Or if you haven't already, do you think that OKRs could be a good way to set goals in your organization or in your HR department? Let us know in the comments down below. With that being said, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. And from this side of the desk, have an absolutely brilliant day. Bye-bye.